Their Donald is back, poised to change America.
We have a new president, y'all!
Viktor Orban, somebody I respect greatly. Viktor Orban, Viktor Orban, Viktor Orban. Did you ever hear of him?
A mashup of Donald Trump on the campaign trail talking about his Hungarian friend.
Took no illegal aliens, none, zero.
Posted by Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban.
Donald Trump being back in office in the White House behind me is music to the ears of many populist leaders across the Atlantic in Europe. Until recently, the figurehead there was Viktor Orban of Hungary. He and Trump and many of Trump's allies were very publicly very friendly. Many expected to see Orban at Trump's inauguration, but he was not there. Instead, the most prominent European populist was Italy's Giorgia Meloni. As Trump starts his second presidency, we are asking, does he need Orban?
Hungary is small and doesn't have significant amounts of important resources. But it is a member of NATO and the EU, and Orban has been making waves in both of those alliances since he was elected in 2010. That's one of the things that observers noted made Orban popular with Trump and his people.
You can see that that the Trump administration is very much planning on dividing the EU. I think Orban could be quite helpful in that regard, but they'd have to have more than that, more than just Orban for that. And so they'll be cultivating other European leaders like Giorgio Meloni and Robert Fico in Slovakia.
Trump and Orban agree in their rejection of the role of international institutions. And so we've seen President Trump withdraw from the World Health Organization. We've seen him withdraw from the Paris Accord. We've seen deep skepticism towards the United Nations. Trump is obviously skeptical of the European Union as an institution that can bring prosperity to the people of Europe.
Orban was an inspiration to many in Trump's circle. They have common ideas against liberal political structures, against inclusive social thinking, which they deride as woke, and in favor of strongman, centralized power. He's been implementing these ideas for 15 years. What he's been doing within Hungary has been exciting for Trump and the MAGA crowd.
Ahogy Amerikában mondják rólunk, mi már Trump voltunk Trump előtt. Nem követők vagyunk, ahogy századokon keresztül voltunk, hanem pionírok, a mintateremtők, a bátor kísérletezők közé tartozunk.
His Fidesz party has a supermajority. He used this to introduce a new constitution in 2011, consolidating power in the executive branch. He's passed hundreds of new laws curbing human and civil rights. Businessmen close to the ruling party now have significant stakes in key sectors like banking, energy, and importantly, to influence public opinion, the media. And new electoral rules have cemented Orban's power.
Viktor Orban has shown the way in how to create what we call an electoral autocracy, and how to sort of slowly but surely undermine the institutions of liberal democracy so that you can create this thing that he named an illiberal democracy. You can see in the ways that Republican officials in the Trump orbit and even Trump himself talk about Orban. They are impressed with what he has achieved, and they are seeking to achieve something similar in the very different context of the United States.
This is something that is making the country much more attractive than its size would suggest otherwise.
The Heritage Foundation, a right-wing US think tank, incorporated Hungarian ideas and tactics in their blueprint for the second Trump term, the Project 2025 document. Orban himself was happy to take some credit.
Bekapcsolódtunk Donald Trump elnök úr csapatának programíró rendszerébe. Mélyen veszünk ott részt.
Orban has reminded them of what you can do with the power of the state, which is just not the way they've been thinking. And this is a big turnaround for U.S. Republicans. And I think you see it even in the first days of the new Trump administration. They now really understand that the administrative state has been their enemy, but if they can get control of it, it can be an enormous asset, an enormous ally.
Orban has not only cultivated Trump's admiration, he has long maintained close ties with Russian President Vladimir Putin. He's positioned himself as a go-between for those two great powers.
It seems to be that Orban is honestly convinced that he could play the role of a bridge and he could profit from having relatively close relations with both sides. To use an American expression, he's honestly convinced that he could milk two cows at the same time.
And yet Orban may have overreached. He introduced a third player into the mix, China. And this may prove to have been a red flag for Washington.
Orban has decided to make his bed with the Chinese car industry and the Russian natural gas. And what really can he bring in terms of creating jobs for Americans? He can help the America First agenda, certainly by fighting against international institutions and backing what President Trump wants to do within the EU. But other than that, the utility is limited.
Clearly, Viktor Orban is not a reliable ally by any metric. I mean, China as the defining issue. This is a administration that is concerned about war with China during the next 4 years. And Viktor Orban is an overt servant of Xi Jinping, both in policy, political, economic action. So how does that correlate with a close policy relationship between Hungary and the United States under Trump? It doesn't.
The EU is under enormous pressure in the face of physical aggression from Russia and seeming abandonment from the US. So much so that even Orban seems to suggest his input may not be needed for things to deteriorate.
Nem találnak ki a németek meg a franciák, és nem állítják új pályára az Európai Uniót, akkor ennek a napjai meg vannak számlálva. Nem kell ebből kilépni, szétesik ez magától is, hogyha ez így megy tovább.
The inspiration that Hungary provided to the far right in the US to undermine democracy is taking on a life of its own. Trump's administration is taking steps which many see as taking the US towards an Orban-style electoral autocracy. Orban himself is not needed for new ideas. And when Trump decided to talk with Putin about ending the Ukraine war, he simply called. He did not need an introduction from Orban. He doesn't even need him as an insider within the EU, because he's ignoring Europe. At the first pre-peace talks meeting in Saudi Arabia in February, the US and Russia not only excluded Ukraine, they also did not invite the Europeans.
So at this point, Trump is more powerful and he feels, that he has control of the situation. Simultaneously, you have Orban, who was a useful tool for Russia to getting to Trump, to, assisting Trump over the past several years. At this point, Orban is, basically trying to present himself as if he still has power, but at this moment he doesn't have power because you can, within the United States. In Europe, it's a completely different story.
If Trump really does want a friend in Europe, these days there are other candidates to choose from. Orban may have been the trailblazer for illiberalism and radical populist policies in modern-day Europe, but he's no longer the only one. And the others are in more important EU countries, Italy, and the biggest of all, Germany.
Although they are not in power, Germany's far-right AfD and their leader Alice Weidel have very public backing from Trump's close advisor Elon Musk. And Italy's Meloni was the only head of a European state at Trump's inauguration. Observers suggest she wants to take Orban's presumed place as Trump's go-to person in the EU. Orban does not seem needed anymore, but his people in Hungary insist it's all still good. Hungary remains confident of its place in Trump's political affections.
The relationship between Mr. Orban and Mr. Trump is as good as has always been, and I believe, as a matter of fact, the tendencies, the energy of the new Trump administration is going to help actually to make it even deeper.
They say Orban decided to skip Trump's inauguration on pragmatic grounds.
And for the Prime Minister, it's not a prestige issue actually to be at a place where it's only about domestic politics. We all know that the inauguration is a big show of domestic American politics, where there's no place and no room and there's no time for any kind of meaningful working negotiation in the background.
Relations have continued, but they seem significantly toned down. Foreign Minister Péter Szijjártó went to Washington twice in the first months of the new administration. But it was only on his second visit that he was able to meet his US counterpart, Marco Rubio. Szijjártó was trying to get the administration to lift Biden-era sanctions on Antal Rogán, a close Orban ally who'd been accused of corruption. There was no immediate change. Instead, indirect criticism of Hungary from Rubio. The US called on partners in Bosnia and Herzegovina to push back against what he calls the destabilizing behavior of Milorad Dodik. Dodik is an authoritarian Bosnian Serb leader recently sentenced to jail for defying the international peace envoy. He's also a close friend and ally of Orban. There are things to learn here for Italy's Meloni and Weidel from Germany's AfD, and anyone else who may bask in the sunshine of Trump's approval. His political friendships last only for as long as they are necessary. That is something which seems clear to politicians both left and center-right, for analysts and journalists.
Orban cannot rely on him. Meloni cannot rely on him. Most of the European leaders have realized we should not even try to really completely count on him. If they really are relying on Trump and think there is something valuable in their relations, they should know by now that this is not the fact. We should count on the fact that we cannot count on him, and therefore we need to be ready and step in the current gap that we are facing.
I guess Donald Trump only cares about Donald Trump. Nobody who might think for the moment he or she could rely on the current US president as a person should be secure about that, because in the past many who relied on him were abandoned afterwards.
When a candidate wins the presidency, they get access to, essentially the top secret intelligence briefings. So Trump has been having those since November. Whether that he has seen, okay, in the briefings, here's what Hungary says about you, but here's what they're doing for Russia, for China. Here's what Meloni is doing in terms of for Ukraine defense, lobbying on your behalf in Europe. Perhaps Trump has seen in the level of detail that there are some allies are, better than others.
Viktor Orban should not be comfortable with his relationship with Trump just because he's been influential. If Viktor Orban is no longer useful, he will be betrayed. If anyone has learned anything about Donald Trump, it is that the relationship that you have with him matters for nothing if he needs something from your enemy tomorrow.
Trump's United States appears to be taking a disengaged, even overtly aggressive stance towards Europe. And even if he remains friendly with Orban, Meloni and others, they too will be affected by what he does.
This is something I think that the nationalist, new populist right leaders in Europe have just started to figure out, that nationalism actually means nationalism. It's not just about religion or immigration, it's actually about the most important bread and butter issues. But when it comes to economic interests, there is a very clear collusion. Tariffs against exports from Europe to the United States would very clearly hurt Europe's economic interests.
That pain will be felt here in Budapest too. regardless of any good feelings between Orban and Trump that may remain. This won't matter at all to Trump. For Orban, it could add to a sense of increasing pressure.
For the first time in over a decade, Viktor Orban's Fidesz party is losing support at home. The largest opposition party, TISA, led by Péter Magyar, is on the rise, and elections are due in a year. Orban's claims to voters that he's a major player on the world stage will ring a little thin now that it appears Trump has downgraded their friendship. Other European countries are trying to pull together in the light of Trump's shift away from traditional alliances. All these things could leave Orban out in the cold.
Just as the populist right is on the rise in Europe, Trump may feel having friends here is no longer necessary. His geopolitical priorities are elsewhere: the Middle East, Russia, and of course, China.